Well, hello and welcome to the Movie Paradise. I'm your host, Nathanael Molnár, and this is Movie Night Tonight. Every week we sit down and watch a new movie, with each month having a new theme. The theme of this month of October is horror films, and the movie we watch tonight is Halloween. I am your host, Nathanael Molnár, and I'm joined by a great panel today. I have Julia Tort.
That's me.
Dave Scrivani.
Hello.
Crystal Gonzalez.
Hello again.
And Nick Girard.
Hi.
So, last night, because this is technically movie night last night, we watched the 1978 John Carpenter film Halloween. And when we're talking about horror movies, which we have been talking about all month, I feel like Halloween is one of those most quintessential horror films. Maybe it's just its namesake, but it's a film in the horror genre that a lot of people look to and hold to be one of the top ones. I'd say right up there with the film we talked about last week, The Exorcist. First, I forgot to do first impressions, which I think is probably an interesting part to start off with. How about we go around and say how many times we've seen the film and what our first impressions were of the film, starting with Julia.
Okay, so I've seen this film a couple times, and to be honest with you guys, I remembered it to be way better than it was. I think the horror aspect of it is really fantastic, mixing his score and the way he filmed it. But the actual acting of this film is terrible. Also, the mouths never match up to the sound. If you watch,
Yeah.
That's all I could notice the entire film. But the horror aspect, mixing with the score, is so good that I can excuse it.
Yeah. Okay. Dave?
I've only seen it, I want to say, only 3 times. Because I remember when I watched it a couple weeks ago in advance of the newest sequel, also titled Halloween, unfortunately. I was watching it, I barely remember any of these scenes. It had been almost 10 years, I think, since I've seen it. And then rewatching it, twice in as many weeks, I'm way on board again. I mean, I've professed my love for John Carpenter on the show before, so not much surprise there as to how much I enjoy the film. But it's also, along with Psycho, I would say it's, the grandfather of the slasher film, so...
Yeah.
Crystal?
I've seen this movie probably a dozen times, and honestly, when I first saw it, I hated it. But then, not gonna lie, first time I hated it. It was this movie, I don't like it. And because my brother showed it to me. But as I kept watching it every year, it kind of grew on me. So.
Nick?
So this was my first time watching it. I don't know. I kind of expected more. I'm not saying I didn't like it, but I did expect a lot more gore, I guess. Spoiler alert, by the way.
Yeah, this is a full spoiler discussion for those listening.
So if you've never seen Halloween, tonight's the night to watch it. And you should watch it. But I didn't expect it to be as gory as everyone kind of made it seem. We could talk more about it. I need to think more about what I want to say, but pretty much, I'd give it a solid 6.
Yeah,
that's my opinion. I comparing it to The Thing. I think they're both completely different movies.
Yeah, they are very different films.
Yeah,
and it had a Thing cameo.
Oh yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
I love that. I
did too. I like the long shot in that because they waited for the entire Thing logo to come through.
Yes.
It was 10 seconds long of this TV.
That's an awesome opening. I would film 10 seconds of someone else's work if it was that cool, too. Fair use.
So, let's get into the score of the film, which I think is probably the most notable thing about the Halloween. Mm-hmm. I think when people think of Halloween, they think of John Carpenter's score.
It's so impactful that I heard the score before, years before seeing the movie, I heard the score. And, honestly... because I heard it so early on, seeing it in the film, I thought it was super drawn out, wicked overplayed. But it was for the time when it came out, that was extremely pivotal. Being one of the grandfather slasher films, that was decent. Yeah. And all that.
Yeah. No, I think that is one of the things I will say about the score is that it is it's very repetitive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think within that, it works really well.
It's nerving.
Yeah, it's the repetition, I think, that really helps make that work. But one of the, I don't want to get too sidetracked into the new one that just came out, also titled Halloween, as Dave pointed out. But I think one of the interesting things about that film is that I think John Carpenter does a better job with the score in that movie because he takes that main theme and he dissects it, and he'll play around with the score in a way that he doesn't with this one. And I think that's just because now doing the score for this one in 2018, 40 years after this one, he's just more of an experienced filmmaker and an experienced musician, more so than when he made this film. Because the filmmakers behind this, John Carpenter and his partner at the time, Deborah Hill, they were kids. And I was just, before we came on the air, I actually watched the commentary, the director's commentary for Halloween, because I had some time and I was like, I kind of want to see it, because I hadn't watched a commentary before. And that's one of the things they really instilled and expressed over and over again, was that they were kids when they made this movie. Yeah. And I think when you look at it from those lens, it's fascinating. Because I think one of the big things about Halloween is the craftsmanship. It's about taking things and basic, simple concepts and the execution of it by John Carpenter, by Deborah Hill, by the people involved. It's the execution of these very simple ideas and these very simple concepts that make it as effective as it is, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought the score was really interesting for the reasoning that these sharp sounds that it had, you know them, you've heard them before. They're kind of ingrained into mainstream media, but when they're paired with first of all, a lack of gore, which was really interesting.
Yeah.
There was no really graphic scenes or anything, but pairing these sharp eardrum popping sounds.
Yeah.
It caught your attention really well.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree.
Yeah.
I think of the score as being the backbone of this film. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that I was thinking when I was watching it this past time was, do these scenes that are as effective as they are right now, do they work as well without the score? Are they still scary or creepy without the score? And they're not. And one of the things that was interesting that John Carpenter pointed out in the commentary was that he said that when he was editing the film, he brought it to a studio executive and he screened it for her, but it didn't have the music. And she said, "This is terrible, this isn't scary, I don't like this at all." And then she saw it later after the movie came out, of course, now having the score, and she comes to him and she says, "I was completely wrong, this is scary, this is terrifying, it works so well." And I think that's so interesting that just the score can have such a major impact on how people interpret the film and how they take it away, that first there's nothing and then add the score and suddenly there is something. Mm-hmm. I think that's really interesting, and John Carpenter's score is really kind of the glue that holds the film together, and helps make it what it is.
I'd say it was definitely crafted well, because it's they don't use it's not this grand 5-minute long piece. It's a little snippet,
Yeah.
And it's complicated enough and high pitched enough to make you nervous, and it would always come when nothing would happen. It would just come to just freak you out, kind of just oh, what's gonna happen?
It elicits worry.
Yeah,
is the best way I can explain it. It's just that sound. If you hear the sound of shattering glass, you're not comfortable. Mm. And I would equate the entire soundtrack to Halloween to just the sound of shattering glass.
Huh.
Scratching chalkboards.
Yeah, same thing. It makes you uneasy.
Yeah.
In a normal leisurely song, you don't hear those notes that are used in the soundtrack and score that's used in this movie. And so it elicits an uncomfortable motion.
Yeah. And that pairs so perfectly with what they're going for, because what do they ultimately have on screen? They have a tall guy in a painted William Shatner mask.
Yeah, I found out about that today.
Yeah.
That it was a Captain Kirk mask.
Yeah, it's perfect because you have what shouldn't work, and with the injection of a score, it works. Yeah. And I just find that fascinating personally. one thing that we've been touching on is the lack of gore and blood in this. And I think that is also one of the key most things about this film that is just so fascinating. Because I think our memory betrays us. That, I know at least, it wasn't until maybe this past time or the time before that I realized there isn't really any blood. You know, in my head, it's a violent film. Yeah. So therefore, because it is violent, it will have blood and it will have gore. But it doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think that's because it relies on the implication of what's going to happen rather than showing what actually happens.
Mm-hmm. But they actually show what happens at one point. Like, right in the beginning, they show it from his point of view.
And even then, they turn the camera away from what's going on and just show his hand going down with the knife.
And even then, you'd think you would see some splashes here or there. Even though, I mean, that's not always how it works. But you would see something on the knife.
Yeah.
And you don't see anything until, like, afterward when it, like, pans out and shows the entire house, and he's like holding the blade. And it's like not even a lot of blood on the blade. It's just like on the tip. Like, this dude was throwing a knife in a body.
She was the most hydrated woman ever, and she just had the thinnest blood in the world.
Oh my god!
Yeah, even after like she gets stabbed, you don't. There's like maybe a bit of blood on her chest, but not nearly enough.
To kill you.
Not nearly as much as you would imagine getting stabbed that many times.
There's not a single stab wound on her body.
No.
Bad
film.
Yeah.
Also, everyone dies super quickly in this film.
Yeah.
Like, when he's strangling someone, there should be like a 5 minutes later screen or something. But it's just like 10 seconds of him strangling them, and then they're just out cold dead.
He just has really strong hands.
That's
I love
something.
a man with a good grip. And so, Michael Myers, please message me on Facebook, Twitter. Absolutely. We'd be a cute duo.
I think that's something in terms of Michael Myers' strength, or the Shape's strength. It's funny because I feel like people don't refer, like in pop culture, we don't refer to him as the Shape. But the film calls him the Shape.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what the film. That's what the Shape was.
Yeah, the Shape was Michael Myers.
Oh, that's weird.
I think that's strange because
Yeah,
we don't refer to him as if I go out on the street.
Yeah, they refer to him as like the Boogeyman.
Yeah. You have to find out who he is through like reasoning. You have to be like, okay, he killed his sister Judith Myers.
Yeah.
And his name is Michael.
Yeah. I think going to the Boogeyman part, I think that's really interesting because I think the Boogeyman concept is separate from Michael Myers.
No, it totally is.
I think it's this very interesting idea that the Boogeyman is this kind of epitome of evil that people are scared of and people are afraid of. And the constant question is whether or not Michael Myers is that. The doctor, Sam Loomis, certainly thinks that. He certainly believes Michael Myers to be this evil entity that just needs to be completely eradicated or else he will continue the kill.
See, there's an issue that I had with that. And that's because I don't understand how Loomis would have understood anything about Michael for the reasoning that he had said explicitly he hadn't said a word in 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
How do you learn something from someone if they don't speak? I understand in future movies they revealed that he's manipulative and really good at it, but you know, if you're manipulated, how would you notice that he's being manipulative?
Also, when he doesn't talk, how do you notice that? But one thing I kind of thought, because I thought about that too, one thing I thought was like, oh, Child Protective Services, except for extremely dangerous children, you know, taken away from the family and like kind of put under care of this doctor. So this doctor kind of has to like watch him and like, literally watch him 24/7. Yeah. And like study his behavioral patterns in like probably a locked room or something like that, you know?
Yeah, that's valid.
I mean, I think we can tell enough.
That's an educated guess because I haven't seen any other film.
I haven't either. I think that's a good precursor just to say I haven't seen, other than the new one that just came out, I haven't seen any of the sequels, so I don't know a lot of the depths of the lore of Halloween, nor do I think it's really relevant to the discussion of this one film. Because then it kind of influences what we think of this film when we're interpreting what's going on with this one movie.
Yeah.
But going on to what you're saying about how can he know Michael without Michael speaking?
Yeah.
And I think after 15 years, there's a lot you could learn about a person just observing the way they interact with the world.
I guess you make a valid point there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's enough that because you have Loomis's speech about how he just looked into Michael's eyes and he just saw pure evil.
Oh yeah,
I think that's so much of like just a gut instinct thing. You could just tell when a person is just bad. Yeah. That I don't think you even need to have that person talk to know the depths of the evil that's behind their eyes.
Yeah, I guess you're right there. I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah, that's at least how I interpreted it and how I took the scene.
I did notice a lot of inconsistencies in this movie. Number one, I had commented on it last night, and it's just my favorite one to think about. I've thought about it 3 or 4 times since we've watched this. Why did they sell a Halloween mask at a hardware store?
I don't know. There are definitely a few things in there that you kind of have to just get over in order to keep going.
I work at a pharmacy. We sell Halloween masks.
Yeah,
well,
but
that's
a
because
pharmacy.
they're good for your health.
I think back then the hardware store was like today's pharmacy. You know, like a pharmacy back then was more prescription drugs. Like I feel like there wasn't as many over-the-counter stuff.
Go to Napa Auto Parts to go get your family medicine.
That's a good point.
Get a tune-up and a ski mask.
The role of the hardware store has kind of changed, and we're looking at it from the perspective of 1978. That's a good point. I hadn't considered that before.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I obviously wasn't alive in 1978, so I don't know. Maybe they had tons of Halloween masks in the hardware stores. I'm not sure.
They're actually a Halloween mask store.
Yeah.
The meaning switched in about 1989.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a few years after this one.
Yeah, so hardware was Halloween masks, and Halloween masks were like tools.
Oh, there we go.
Big difference now.
Yes, I can see it. It all makes sense now.
Yeah.
I want to be a tool for Halloween.
You already were.
Whoa.
Oh.
Whoa.
Wow.
Got me good.
Told your L.
So, what's interesting, because we talk about, with Halloween, we talk about the lack of blood, we talk about the lack of gore. And this is 1978 with Halloween. And then fast forward a few years to 1982, and we get The Thing. And that is filled with blood and gore. And and like Nick was saying earlier, they're completely different films. And so, since we have watched and we have talked about The Thing as part of movie night tonight, and now we turn our attention to Halloween, I'm interested to talk about what are the differences, and whether do we find one approach to be more impactful than the other? Are they effective in their own rights, just having their own approaches to handling blood and gore?
The thing is, they're very different films, clearly. But I do remember when I was watching Halloween a couple weeks ago, having seen The Thing countless times, I remember thinking this is a very different, stripped down John Carpenter than The Thing is, and some of his other films too. Because I'm very well acquainted with the other films, but again, I hadn't seen Halloween for years. So it was kind of surprising to me. In terms of the lack of gore, that's just a matter of taste, I think. It doesn't need to be bloody or gory to be effective, I feel. It's kind of just pardon the saying, the cherry on top, I guess. That's how I see it, at least.
Yeah. No, and I think going back a little bit to what I was saying, it's the implication of what happens in Halloween. And I think in the case of Halloween, they did not need to show blood and they did not need to show gore for people to understand what was going on. Exactly. It wasn't necessary. And I think with The Thing, it's different. I think maybe you could have told the same story without the blood and gore, but as we talked about or at least to the same extent as in The Thing, but as we talked about on our discussion of The Thing, that is one of the hallmarks of that film. That's something so imperative into the DNA of The Thing.
Literal
is the
DNA.
Blood. Literal DNA. Literal DNA.
People are exploding into Venus flytraps. There has to be blood there. That's just unrealistic. What are we made of clay?
Yes, we are. You exposed it.
So, we talked a little bit about the opening scene with the POV shot of young Michael Myers going through the house and then killing his sister. And I think this is just a brilliant way to open us up to the characters and to the film into what this ultimately is. I love the fact that it is all a POV shot. I think that adds to it, and I think it would have a completely different effect if it was shot traditionally. If we just saw it happen as it is. Because part of what makes it so effective is that we see this brutal killing of a girl, and then we see immediately at the very end that it is a little kid.
Yeah.
I think that's the punch right there.
Yep. I meant to bring it up. I think that's one of the best shots in the movie.
Yeah.
Is when they take this mask off, and it's a little blonde kid.
Yeah.
In a clown costume. Which is one of the least intimidating things in the world.
Yeah.
And he's holding this giant knife, and it's just a slow back away from it.
Yeah.
I think this is a beautiful shot. And again, one of the things that excuses the unbelievably bad acting for me.
Yeah. No, I think it's a sign of John Carpenter and his abilities as a director. It was that he knew that's how you had to set up that shot. You had to frame it like that, because it's the horror of that moment isn't the killing, it's the fact that it's being done by a kid.
Yep.
And I think he understood that, and that's how that scene was crafted, and that's why it's so effective. And I think that puts us in such a great position going into the film and going into the actual story, because then we kind of understand when Dr. Sam Loomis is talking about the evil behind Michael's eyes, and he's talking about how he looks into his eyes and he just sees pure evil. We can understand that better because we have a visual precedent for that evil at the very beginning of the film. I mean, we see this kid just absolutely murder his sister. We find out later it's his sister.
Yeah.
And that makes it even more cold-blooded. Mm-hmm. And so because we have that precedent in the very beginning of the film, when we hear Sam Loomis talk about Michael Myers being pure evil, we go, yep, we get that. We understand because we saw it happened at the beginning of the film.
I feel like her reaction too, like when I first heard her reaction, she was, I don't know, it's just the way she like said his name, like she said like Michael, and like I said, I haven't seen this film, so like going into it, I thought of it like, wait, it's just like they know the killer, and it's just like Michael, and then he comes in,
Mikey,
just stabs the crap out of her. But then like now looking at it, it's like she was like generally like confused, like why is he like, it's just like a wicked traumatizing moment to see unfold, and like to see like a human being's like reaction to that kind of thing, like just seeing your brother with a knife trying to scare you, and then surprise, he just kills you right there.
Yeah,
like that was just unreal to me.
The perfect Halloween prank. Really pulled one over on her there.
I don't even think he knew what he did at the end. He was just kind of like, was that supposed to happen? Like,
yeah. I don't know. I think that's such a brilliant way to open the film.
It really was.
Yeah, it just perfectly catapulted us into the film. So one thing that I think is really interesting, because we're talking about Dr. Sam Loomis, is the direct connection this film has to Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. And Psycho is a film that we did a couple of weeks ago on the show. Because Sam Loomis, if you'll remember, is the name of Marion Crane's lover, boyfriend, whatever it is.
Boyfriend that won't date her.
Yes, that is his actual name. Is Sam Loomis, and so John Carpenter talked many times about how he directly was inspired by Psycho, and of course Jamie Lee Curtis is the daughter of Janet Leigh, who played Marion Crane in Psycho. And so John Carpenter talked many times, especially when I was watching his commentary today, he talked a lot about how he was trying very much to invoke a Alfred Hitchcock style in his film.
Nathaniel, you're blowing my mind with these facts. I had
this
no idea.
This is really interesting. I didn't know about this.
Yeah.
I saw it. I definitely
just
saw the influence.
Just recently found out that Jamie Lee Curtis was Janet Leigh's daughter.
Yeah.
And I think it was on Ian Brower's couch, possibly.
Huh.
And so I was very confused at first. My mind was blown. And now we're finding more ties to Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah.
So
And-
let's
yeah.
plug Activia now before we
And I think
before we go any
John
further.
Carpenter even said, he said something along the lines of, the best way I could honor Psycho would be to hire Jamie Lee Curtis for this role. And and even when I was watching the commentary, there'd be shots that Carpenter would say, yep, that was Hitchcock. Or, yep, I was doing Hitchcock right there. Like, the fact that one movie had, like, spilled so much into this film. I just find that really interesting. And it was completely unintentional, but I've found that for this month of horror movies, every single horror movie we've talked about has had like a direct connection to every other one. The Thing, Alien, Psycho, The Exorcist, Halloween. They're all interconnected in some really strange ways. I didn't intend that at all, but I think it works perfectly.
The worst family tree ever.
I think the filmmakers intended that to fall onto you.
Yes.
Like, I'm going to make this guy watch all of these movies.
Yes.
They're all connected.
It was all the
Illuminati.
Yes. I have to find all the signs, Going back to the fact that all these films are connected, let me bring up a movie that we talked about, Alien. Because something I find really interesting about Halloween is how, and this was something we talked about with Alien in regards to that film, is low-budget filmmaking yielding the best results. When the filmmakers don't have everything at their disposal, when the filmmakers don't have the budgets to make the movies that they want, they are forced to resort to different things in order to cut corners, to find ways around, and that is when the creativity comes out, and that's when you get something like Alien, or Jaws, or Star Wars, or even Halloween. In the case of Alien, we talked about how the reason why you don't see the alien so much in that film is because they didn't have the budget to have a really good-looking alien. But part of what makes that movie work so much is that you don't see the alien. Same thing with Jaws. They had the shark made, ready to go, and it broke, and so therefore they had to not show the shark as much as they wanted to, but that's what makes that film work. And in the case of Halloween, the fact that it is so low budget, and the fact that it cost them, I think it was like $300,000.
Oh, wow.
To make this movie.
Wow.
And then it ended up going on to make like $57 million or something. It was one of the highest grossing independent films of all time. But the fact that they did not have the budget to do the things they wanted to do yielded the best results. And I find that so interesting when looking at film and looking at film history and seeing how these iconic movies are really the result of filmmakers not getting what they want and having to find new ways to do it.
It's inspiring as a film major, I'd say. You know, it just seems like doable from my perspective. Like, I can make something similar to this, not similar to the subject matter, but similar to I can make something with a similar impact. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it's completely agree. And when we were talking about Alien, I brought up Star Wars and how you have George Lucas having to find all these ways around doing what he wants to do because he had such a small budget. The small budgets yield the best results. And it's because that's where the filmmakers, that's where the directors, the writers, the producers, they're thrown in the deep end. And they have to find ways to get around what they cannot do. And that's where you either sink or you swim. So I think in the case of Halloween, they did not have the budget to do probably a lot of the things that they wanted to do. But it works so well because then the focus came on how can we utilize what we do have as much as we can. And what they did have was a great score that John Carpenter was working on since while they were writing the film. They had a great score, and they had a creepy guy in a mask. And that's all they could do.
You could need in life.
That's all they could do, and that's all they could rely on. That's all they could harp on. And then that's how you get the movie that we have.
Yeah, I also feel like with low-budget movies, you get, like, the best emotions pulled out of it. Just in my perspective, because it's like, this is bad, but you get so much memory from it, and it just stands out better.
Yeah. What's interesting about Halloween, and I feel like I've said that phrase a lot in this discussion, but
there's a lot of things interesting about it.
It is. It's a very interesting film.
Made my noggin jogging. That's all I gotta say about it.
But while Halloween was not the first slasher film, I think it really kind of pioneered the slasher genre. And when you look at not just slasher films, but horror films in general, in the past 40 years, so much has stemmed from Halloween and the things that John Carpenter introduced and utilized in Halloween. And you can see that directly in all the 40 years of horror filmmaking that has come since. And so talking about Halloween's legacy, obviously it has very clear impact. It had a very clear impact when it came out in 1978 and made a lot of money. So it has that going for it. But also looking at its legacy of why do we still talk about Halloween? And I think this is...
Because it's Halloween.
Exactly, yes. We were talking about Halloween because it is Halloween.
Yep.
But aside from that point, I find it interesting because I hear some people directly say, well, I don't think we should be talking about Halloween. That it's not a worthy movie to talk about. And then I hear some people say that this is just an absolutely brilliant film and that it's one of the greats. And so I just want to pose it as a question. Why do we still talk about Halloween? What
I
about
think
this
both
film?
parties are wrong here in that one. I don't think it's an amazing film. I think it's a classic. And I said this to Matt Bombard last night. I think it's a classic, but it's not good. I sat back and I laughed to myself while I watched this movie. But aside from all of that, it's well constructed.
Yeah.
But I think we talk about Halloween because it set the stage for what was going to happen in the future. We talk about it because it showed people how to elicit emotion from a soundtrack. It showed people how to set up a shot where you didn't even have to see the killer, but you were afraid. Especially, I think that part, I don't remember his name, but the girl that smoked a lot of cigarettes.
Yeah.
Annie.
Annie. Her boyfriend, when Michael was in the closet, that was a terrifying part. And there was nothing that should be scary about it. He's opening doors and everything, you know, and then Michael comes out. I think this movie set the stage for kind of the jump scare that wasn't a jump scare. It shows things how to be scary. I don't think Psycho was scary. I think Psycho was, you know, a slow, you know, just makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
This was scary. And obviously, as we talked about, the score. But I think that's why we talk about Halloween, is it's setting the stage. It's not that it's this incredible movie, but it was groundbreaking in itself.
So then is there a case to be made that we only talk about Halloween because of its place in film history and not for what it actually does on its own as a film?
Personally, I think that's the reason we should be talking about it, but I also think people are talking about it because it's a classic and they enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because it is, sitting back and watching it with friends, it's enjoyable, it's fun.
Can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like we still talk about Halloween because capitalism. Because Hollywood likes to market, you know, when it is Halloween, they would like to market Michael Myers, you know, Jason, Freddy Krueger, all these icons that kind of pioneered, you know, the horror genre. Yeah. And I think Halloween, you know, it's a simple costume. You know, he buys a costume in the movie. It stands out because of, I think, like the holiday in a sense. But I'd say for its movie, like, honestly, I feel like the imagery from the movie stands out more than the movie itself, in my opinion, in today's world.
Michael Myers is an iconoclast in himself, I'd say.
Michael Myers is an actor also, so...
that's the one I'm calling an icon, really.
Yes.
Austin Powers, just another perfect man for me.
I also feel like it's more of a generation kind of thing. Like, people... Like, I only saw this movie because my brother showed it to me. And then people, so, like, you watch something, then you show it to another person, and then pass it along. So that's what my stance on it is.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm glad that it's still passed on, because it teaches us how to do other and better things. But, yeah, I totally agree with your point. It is passed on. And I agree with Nick's point, too, that it is definitely a marketing thing.
See, but I think with Halloween, something that should be or is taken away is the restraint. And I think that's something that we have gone away from in the 40 or so years that have happened since Halloween in terms of horror filmmaking, is that you don't have to show everything, that not everything needs to be seen, that there is power in suggestion, that there is power in implication, that because I think something Carpenter talked about in his commentary of the film was that there has been so much, so many films have come after this that have directly taken from this movie, and they've found that the way to separate themselves from Halloween is to show the blood, is to show the gore, and there's something that is lost, I think, in that because this film is so effective, and it doesn't need to show anything. It's all through the power of suggestion. And I think that's something that not a lot of filmmakers going beyond horror completely understand nowadays, is the idea that not everything needs to be seen, that things can be implied through editing, through lighting, through score. Things can just be implied. Yeah,
I think showing the gore in some films, not all of them, because some do it very well, can lack creativity. It can take away from it, because you don't need to think about how you're going to make this scary without seeing some explicit someone get killed explicitly.
Yeah.
I don't think it fully takes away from the creativity, because you have to show how this person's getting killed in a scary way. But I think it would be a lot harder. I'm not a film person or anything, so I don't know how film works. But I think it would be a lot harder to make it scary without any gore than to set up a person dying.
See, I completely agree. And I think that's one of the interesting things about John Carpenter, is that with Halloween, he shows us that you don't have to show anything in terms of blood or gore to be effective. And then with The Thing, where people would probably not show as much as he showed, he shows that is so completely necessary for that one film, that the blood and the gore is so quintessential to that film, as I put in the DNA of the movie, that it needs to be shown. And so I think the point John Carpenter makes, if he is trying to make a point, but the point that I derive from it is that it's all about the film and what that one individual film needs. In the case of this Halloween, it didn't need to show any of the blood or gore, because it was powerful enough on its own that it didn't need to show it. That would be kind of overstaying its welcome in a way.
Yeah.
And then with The Thing, it absolutely needed to show that, or else it would not be nearly as impactful or as effective as that was.
Yeah. I brought this up in our last one on The Exorcist, same film I brought up, but a film that parallels this is the Blair Witch Project. They don't show anything.
Yeah.
It's just the characters. And I think the Blair Witch Project is really interesting. I can't tell if I like or hate it. But I speak well of it for the reasoning of its lack of gore. And I think Halloween may have set the stage for that.
Yeah. No, you could definitely see the Halloween influence in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that was just something I had to bring up.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. And that kind of shows the Carpenter influence, or at least I don't like to say Carpenter influence, because as I was just talking about, Carpenter is bloodless in one movie and completely filled with blood in another.
Yeah.
So that's not really his technique, but rather I'd say his technique is more finding out what the film needs. So more the Halloween technique.
Yeah. You kind of see a dead middle between those two. And if you guys have seen The Ward.
I have not.
I have.
I saw it when I was in 8th grade. And I thought it was tight as hell.
Yeah.
Just cool. Nowadays, I don't know, I haven't seen it in long enough to really have an opinion. But I do remember there being only a little bit of gore. So this man has a whole spectrum of fake blood in his cabinet.
Yeah. So going back to this idea of how restrained Halloween is, I'd like to talk a little bit about how they choose to shoot Michael Myers. Because I think when watching it, I think it's so interesting that you just have, it's mostly just shots from behind, not showing his head at all, of just his shoulder. Or his shoulder down.
Or it's like an Easter egg in the background. Like,
yeah.
That was actually one thing that really stood out to me, and if you noticed this back then, it definitely would make the impact of the film stronger. But like Michael Myers was like almost in every scene in the background. Like there was a scene where I forget who, but someone meets the mayor in broad daylight. Not the mayor. Why did I say the mayor? The doctor in broad daylight, and the doctor like asks of Michael Myers or something, and he's like, he's around here, I know it. And in the background, or no, because Michael Myers drives that town car, someone else was driving that town car or something, and then he saw, or like you see someone driving that town car and they're like, oh, it's this guy, and then he literally gets out of the car, and then the doctor's like, he's around here somewhere, and you literally see that same town car drive behind him, and Michael Myers is in it. Yeah. You know, he's like in the background of a lot of shots.
Yeah, when they were smoking a substance in the car. When they were talking to her father, the sheriff, if you look in the background, Michael just speeds right by.
Yeah.
I'd also like to point out that I noticed that this town of Haddonfield?
Haddonfield.
I think it's Haddonfield.
Something like that. Worst roads in the world. I don't know what the taxes are there, but when you watch the cars drive, all they do is bump.
It seems like a farming community out in Illinois. There's a lot of shots of like fields and stuff.
Really? I thought of it as a suburbia type situation.
See, farm suburbia, same deal.
Farm suburbia.
One supports themselves, one doesn't.
It was filmed in California, I know that.
Oh.
But it was made to look like Illinois.
Yeah.
California, Illinois, what's the difference, really?
I know.
Going back again to the commentary, because it's fresh on my mind, they were talking about having to hide palm trees as much as possible. Because there are palm trees and they're...
I thought palm trees grew very naturally in Illinois, you know?
Yeah, well, you would be right.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I'm no ecology major.
You seem like you're from Illinois. You seem like you know you're...
My dad was born there.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Never lived there, just born there. My dad is Michael Myers.
Well. Wow.
His name is Michael, actually.
Can I meet him?
I mean, I guess he's not really nice. He's like 6'4", 250, kind of mean, but you can meet him if you want.
What a twist.
Something about Michael Myers that they have in all their shots is the heavy breathing. And that's something I don't think I realized the first time I saw it, or first couple times. I don't think I picked up on that. Or at least that it was even there. And then the second last time I saw it, because similar to Dave, I saw it right before I went and saw the new Halloween a couple of weeks ago, and then I watched it again last night. But I noticed that time that I saw it a couple of weeks ago, I was like, oh wow, it's just Michael Myers breathing. And at first I didn't know how to feel about that, because at first I thought it was a little bit annoying, because it just for like most of the movie.
That's a great impression of it.
But it works. Thank you. Yes.
That heavy breathing, it was just me after walking upstairs. Sorry.
But I think it really works, and it's something that I didn't think of even the past few times I've seen it. It's not something that really hit me or struck me the right way, and when I did notice it, my first thought was, oh, I don't like this. But then I came to think of it more. I was like, what a great technique. Because what that does is that when you have the shots where you see him from behind and he's breathing, you associate that breathing with him being there.
Yeah.
And then you have shots where you just hear the breathing, but you don't see him.
The shot that I really liked, where you didn't hear the breathing and you didn't see him, was right before he killed Annie in the car. And you only knew he was there because the windows were fogged up from the inside.
Yeah.
That, I thought, was a really cool shot.
Yeah.
And I keep criticizing this movie and then giving good shots that they had. But I love the shot. I was, recapping the movie, watching a little snippet. And I sat down, laying in my nice twin XL bed. And I was like, that's a great shot.
Yeah.
She has no idea. She's the snarky, attitude-ridden girl, just filled with confidence, and she just gets decimated from a back seat.
Yeah.
In this fogged-up car.
Yeah.
Imagine how it smelled. Probably not good.
No,
he doesn't
probably
brush his
not.
teeth. He ate a dog.
Did he eat the dog?
Yeah, that's when they went into the house. They were like, "It's warm. He must have been hungry." That was a dog that he ate.
I don't know if I realized he ate the dog.
I watched that today. Yeah, he ate a dog.
I know he strangled
not Annie's
the dog.
It was just another token dog.
Huh.
So it wasn't the dog from Annie's house. It was just another dog. But when they went into the Myers house, there was a dead dog that he ate. It wasn't shown explicitly, but they said it.
Huh. Wow.
Oh.
That makes it even darker.
So on doesthedogdie.com, Michael Myers' 2 dogs died.
2 dogs.
Not very cool.
We should transition into final thoughts and just say real quick what our final thoughts are on the movie of Halloween to bring our discussion to a close, starting with Julia.
Starting with Julia, okay, I think this movie's a goofball. I can't tell if I love or hate it, just like the Blair Witch Project after talking about it for a while, because I hate all the acting in this movie. I hate a lot of the things about it, but there are so many good shots and the score is so good that I'm really faced with an ultimatum. And that ultimatum I choose just never to confront, just like all my other problems. So, on to the next.
All right, fair enough. Final thoughts. It's good, not great.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in one of my favorite Carpenter movies. Probably not even in the top 5 Carpenter movies. My personal. There's a lot I like about it, but I feel the sum of all its parts, it just kind of falls flat for me.
Mm-hmm.
I still like the film, but I think like Nick said, I was expecting more from it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
Halloween, classic, but not good. That's it.
Solid. I'd say, like, talking about it definitely gave me more an appreciation for it. I definitely would want to watch it again, but I wouldn't glorify it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it set a good tone for what horror movies are going to be for the next, like, decades. I meant decade, but I had to include the fact that it's been 40 years since the 70s, so I think it's not terrible. It's definitely, like, a good movie to show your kid if you want to traumatize them.
Yeah.
So that's
Keep that in
a thing.
mind.
I did want to bring that up before we ended, is I would watch this movie with friends. I wouldn't sit down in my bed and watch this on Netflix by myself.
Yeah, I'd rather watch Twin Peaks.
Not with that attitude.
Yeah, that's called the bad attitude that Annie had, and that's how you end up dead. So
You're right.
But I think it's a solid film, and I think it's a film that's worth watching even today, because I think it still has the same effects it did back then.
Yeah. Going into my final thoughts, Halloween is a movie that I have come to appreciate over time, having seen it probably 5 or so times now. It's a film that didn't leap out to me the first time I saw it. Probably going off of what a lot of you are saying, that, I was expecting more. It was good, but it wasn't great. And I think it's one that the more times I see it, the more I come to appreciate the craft behind it. I come to appreciate what John Carpenter does with his restraint in terms of what he shows and what he doesn't show. And while we've seen films in the past 40 years that have taken elements of this movie and have probably done them better, I think there are also elements of this film that filmmakers have completely missed in the past 40 years, that they don't understand, that John Carpenter and Deborah Hill understood when they made this film. So for me, is it a great, fantastic movie? No. But I think there are some really important and fascinating things within the film that are done. And I think, Julia, you kept talking about how you're like, I don't know if I necessarily like the movie, but this shot in particular was great, or this shot in particular was great. And I think that's kind of the point of Halloween, is that as a whole, it is not the greatest, but what makes it great are these individual components. Yeah. The score. This one scene is so effective. This other one scene is so effective. And I think it is those things that so completely took filmmakers and film fans, it just took them and have influenced them for the past 40 years. Yeah. I think that's how we get to today, still talking about Halloween, because it's a film that is so incredibly influential for the different components and the things that it pioneered and the things that it did. Yeah. So I definitely think Halloween is worth talking about still. And
we did for an hour.
Yes.
So there's obviously something to say.
Yeah. So that will do it for our discussion of the 1978 John Carpenter film Halloween, and this is the final installment in our month of horror movies. Next month, the month of November, we are getting into action science fiction films. which I'm very excited about. And the first movie we're going to be talking about is Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Let's go.
All right.
My senior quote was Arnold Schwarzenegger. Do you guys want to know what it was?
Yes.
Yes.
No milk. Milk is for babies. It was a background noise
I love it.
pumping iron, and it was when I was a power lifter. And so at that point, I made that my senior quote.
Nice.
Perfect.
Solid.
So that's going to be the first film in our month of action sci-fi movies. So that's going to be a good discussion. I'm looking forward to that one. You've got a week. Watch Predator, and then come join us for the discussion after.
You've got homework.
Yes.
Yeah.
You'll always have homework with movie night tonight. Well, once again, I am your host, Nathanael Molnár. I'm joined by a great panel today. I'd like to thank you all for being here. Julia Tort.
Hey, that's me. Thanks for having me.
Dave Scrivani.
Always a pleasure.
Crystal Gonzalez.
Thank.
And Nick Girard.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, you guys, for doing this. You can check us out on all of our social medias at Movie Night TNT. Not tonight, Movie Night TNT. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. That's where you can figure out all the details about our upcoming shows. Thanks for listening, everyone.